The Lost Art with Andrew Cox podcast. Marine Corps League and Till Valhalla Project Ambassador. Now streaming on all major podcast platforms. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast that's given a voice to our veterans. The Lost Art with Andrew Cox. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Lost Art Podcast. That podcast giving a voice to our veterans. I'm your host, Andrew Cox, and today we're having part 3 with Robbie Robinson. But before we get into the episode, you enjoying the podcast, and make sure you go to the website. That's thelostart.podbean.com. Go check us out, see what we're all about. There's a couple ways you can help support us in our adventure of getting our veteran voices out for all to hear. You can go to that website. There's a one-time donation link. You can click on that. You can give a one-time donation. There's a Become a Patron link. That's a monthly donation. Just click on that. It'll tell you what to do. And you can go in there and purchase some cool merchandise and help spread the love about the podcast that way. Or if you have a business, you can always advertise here on the business. And all you got to do is click on that tab and it'll tell you what to do as well. A big shout out to the Till Valhalla Project. Man, that group is out there doing some amazing work. I love their mission. I think everybody should go out and support this group. It is absolutely 100% amazing. But you can find them at tillvalhallaproject.com. Are you a Marine veteran? Are you missing that bond you had on active duty? Then I have a place for you. Join the only congressionally chartered Marine Corps Veteran Service Organization, the Marine Corps League. Get that brother and sisterhood back in your life. Become one of the fewer, the prouder, a Marine Corps League member. All right, we are back, man. I'm ready to go. I don't know about you, but I'm excited to hear more about your fighter pilot and all that stuff. Man, it's just so cool to have this on here. So thanks, Robbie. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun. It's becoming, just a regular thing here, isn't it? Okay, I got to go talk to AJ, give him some more fighter stories here, right?
That's right. I love it.
Yeah, my wife, we've been married for 50 years and we dated about 3 years before we got married. So she's heard all my fighter pilot and test pilot stories for years. And she always warns people, she says, "Now be careful if you ask him something,
He's going to tell you." This be captured for a little bit.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So, hopefully these are things that are educational.
The
people Absolutely. Get a better appreciation of aviation in general and not. So let's just keep on pressing on here then.
All right. Well, I can pull up the slideshow here and where we left off. And if I can, how the heck do I do that? Why is it not up there? All right. There we go. All right. Just took me a couple of clicks there. In the last podcast, we talked about a lot of stuff that I was doing at Edwards. When you're not doing testing, sometimes you get called to do administrative duties as well. And that means, right, you can't fly all the time. So, you got to do desk work and whatnot also. So one of the things that they'll ask test pilots and test engineers who graduate from test pilot school to do is to sit on technical safety review boards for other programs at Edwards. And so these are 3 of the programs that I sat on to evaluate. And so both from a technical perspective, and so you'll sit in a room, with other engineers and pilots, and the test team that is planning to do the program will then give you briefings on what their test plan is, their master test plan, and what their objectives are, and how they're going to do it and all that. And so you'll go through, and so you're doing an evaluation from the technical perspective. Is it sound? Is this something that you really need to be doing and whatnot? And then after you determine that it's technically acceptable as far as what they're planning to do, then the next step is then you'll have a safety review board, and you'll you'll now go through and you'll evaluate all of the testing that is planned to be done, and then you will determine what part you think is considered low risk, what you consider to be medium, what you consider to be high risk. And then the things you say, well, okay, these are really high risk or these are medium risk. What are the mitigating circumstances? What are the things you're going to do if something goes wrong?
Right.
And so those become constraints as far as what the test team has to actually do. So we're talking about where I was asked to go drop that nuclear bomb, the B-61, over in Nevada at 100 feet, 1.23, which was considered a high risk maneuver. One of the mitigating circumstances was, okay, have you ever done this before? Go out and practice this, before you actually do this live kind of thing.
Right.
So these are 3 programs that most people probably don't know about that I thought I would talk a little, just very quickly. One of them is the X-29 research program, and notice the wings. The wings are swept forward.
Yeah.
Instead of back, which is, you look at that and you go, what's going on here? Well, because it was research, they were trying to evaluate how that aircraft handled at high angles of attack, because the airflow, if you can see on the wings how the paint with the dark streaks from the outer part into towards the fuselage.
Right.
At high angle of attack, that's actually how the airflow flows over the wing when you get to really high angles of attack. Okay, before it stalls or not. And a typical airplane with the wings swept back, it does just the opposite. So you start losing controllability. And so they were trying to see how maneuverable that airplane was at extreme angles of attack. And then if you look at the big tail section where the nozzle is, and you can see there's something, you really can't tell that well. That is a drag chute mechanism. Okay. So really extreme high angles of attack, and then they depart to control flight. You don't know whether you can recover the airplane or not, and so you use a drag chute to help you. The drag chute comes out, and that'll help. Hopefully get you back under control with the nose pointed down. So then you can fly out of it. Because to get into a spin, you need 2 things. One, you need to have to control departure from control flight. You need to be in a stalled situation, and then the second, you need yaw. And so if you get yaw and stalled, then the airplane will go in like a flat spin and whatnot. And sometimes you just can't get the flight controls to alleviate that rotational movement. And so you eject. Well, so if you get the nose down, get more airflow going over the nose, hopefully you can recover from the stall. And if you recover from the stall, then jettison the parachute. Because thing, right? So you have the ability after you deploy, then you can also jettison the parachute after you recover. So that's what that program is. It's just do research on how aircraft handle the extreme high angles of attack. Right. The program is called the F-20 Tiger Shot, and that was a Northrop program, and they are taking a T-38 trainer aircraft and modifying it, putting a single engine in, and they wanted that to be a low-cost aircraft that they could sell in 4 national sales and also sell to the Air National Guard organizations around the country. And so they came up with this program, and so they were primarily doing their own thing. You can see here, I think it's shooting up a Maverick missile to show its capability to use different types of weapons and whatnot. It was a good airplane, but the problem was, and this is just kind of just a broad brush thing there, things that look good, but they never get to an operational perspective, because most foreign military sales countries that they were trying to sell this to said, well, the Air Force isn't buying this. Okay, why should we buy it? Okay, we're going to go get. So it was competing against the F-16, and it just couldn't get any traction. Right. Unfortunately. So that program ultimately died. And then the program on the right, F-15 anti-satellite test. You're going to love this. They loaded that missile in the belly underneath the fuselage of an F-15. Okay, and a test pilot by the name of Doug Pearson goes up, and that airplane takes off and climbs up, and he's got steering cues, and he releases that missile, and he's got a safety chase and a photo chase. That's who took that picture. We actually shot down a satellite with that airplane and that missile.
No kidding.
We actually shot down a satellite. Now, after that happened, I got to tell you, at the time, this is before the Space Force and all of that.
Yeah.
Congress just went ballistic after they found out that we actually shot down somebody. It's our own satellite, but the fact we shot it down, and so everybody was saying, well, space is a place, not a mission. Now, this was back in about the 84 to 86 time frame. Now, look how things have changed over the years, where we now have a separate Space Force, right?
Right, yeah.
You know, people in uniform that are totally focused on space operations itself. So anyway, yeah, back in you know in the early 80s, we had the capability to shoot satellites down then even. So
I would have never guessed that. That's insane.
Isn't it though? Absolutely,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, you can Google that and read up on it. So it's not like it's top secret. It's just that it was well advertised. And again, after we did it, there were people in Congress who just didn't think that on the world stage that was something that we need to be doing at the time. You know, it is what it is. Okay, so that's just, I thought, just kind of an by the wayside thing there. You know, that you might enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay. Before we go off that, before we go to that, let me tell you another little war story. Okay. Last time when I was in the F4 and I was at 100 feet doing Mach 1.23 when I was dropping at 61 and practice runs and the blowtorch that went across the desert and all that, just how much energy, you know, that you generate when you're going supersonic due to the shock wave. That comes. And a lot of people don't understand what a shock wave is. You know, they hear a sonic boom. So I'll tell you just real quickly the physics behind a shock wave, you know, as simple as I can. That is, imagine you're standing on the shore of a lake and the water is perfectly calm. Okay. And then now let's say off to your left, some boat starts puttering along and he goes from left to right in front of you. And that wake will then, let's say your toes are standing right on the edge of the water, and that wave will then come over your toes, right? And it'll just be, you know, and it's just going to be kind of a V-shaped thing that comes off a boat, right? As the boat goes along, it kind of forms that V. Well, that V is also what happens in the air when you're flying. The sound waves go out, and they can only go out as fast as its air will allow, and so they tend to pack up, and that's so you'll get that V, which is a pressure wave, a change in the pressure as you're flying through the air. Okay, well, so I was asked part of our activities there, with regard to testing the F-16. One day we were asked to go out and they wanted me to drop a fuel tank off of the F-16 while I'm going supersonic. Okay. And yeah, and the reason is because they're kind of that F-20, we had not really used the F-16 for air defense for our own country. So they came up with a plan for using F-16s for air defense within America. And they said, okay, well, you know, if they take off and that they need to go supersonic, intercept some foreign adversary that's coming at them. Okay, after those fuel tanks are dry, you want to get them off if you can. Okay.
Oh, I see.
And so you want to get them off. Particularly if you want to keep on going, because now they're just drag. You know, weight with no drag and no fuel. So, you know, not good to you. So they wanted us to do supersonic drops to see, you know, what happens, you know, when you drop it, what happens to the tank. Is the tank going to swing back up and hit the bottom of the fuselage or hit the tail or whatever? Yeah, I mean those things can happen.
Oh my
So
gosh.
so they asked me to do this fuel tank drop at 30,000 feet and do a Mach, about Mach 1.4 or something like that. I don't know. It was a supersonic. Well, the medium altitude supersonic corridor went right over the top of the housing area at the base. So okay, so I take off. I go up to the medium altitude supersonic corridor, and I plug it in the afterburner, and I'm scorching along, and I get on test conditions. And then the engineers on the ground said, "Yeah, you're cleared to drop." So boom, I hit the pick button, boom, the fuel tank comes off. Well, I only had one fuel tank, okay, just on the side. And going back, we talked about how the F-16 flight controls it's all electronic with computers that do things. Well, with that fuel tank on the right side, you had it more drag. And so I just told the stick wings level, okay, and so it was doing what it needed to do to keep its wings level.
Right.
The second that the fuel tank separated, now it had these flight controls that were accommodating the drag on the right side, and suddenly it says, "Hey, there's nothing over on that right side anymore," and it just immediately immediately just changed the flight controls to accommodate now a different drag and aerodynamics on the aircraft.
Yeah.
When that tank came, I could feel that, and it was like a line went through the middle of from my head down, to my toes, and it was like an earthquake in my body. I mean, literally, I could just kind of feel that change as the flight controls dithered about to keep the wings level.
Oh.
I had never experienced that sensation in my life before at all. But what was that? And so I'm still screaming along and doing Mach 1.4 at 30,000 feet. And I'm going, wow, that was really weird, And so, okay, fine. So I finish everything up. I land, I go back. After you do test missions, you have to write out a test report, things that happen. And so I wrote up that phenomenon, as far as what happened. Hey, this was something I'd never experienced before. So then I go home, and when I come in the house, and my wife is in she's off of the kitchen area. We had another room there, kind of like a study room or something like that. And that's where I used to keep fish tanks. So I had like a 55-gallon fish tank, okay? And I go into the room where the fish tank is, and here's all these pots and pans on the floor. And I said, "What's going on?" And she says, "Man," she says, "there was this sonic boom this afternoon, and it cracked the glass in the aquarium." And she said, "So I've been bailing the water out with fish, save the fish, and save the." Minimize the damage to the leakage on the carpet and all that. I said, so I asked her, I said, "What time did that happen?" She said, "Oh, that was about 3 o'clock this afternoon." I went, "Oh, that was me."
There's something about you, sonic booms, and tanks for some reason. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. And all that. Yeah. So I can't tell you how many things I ended up breaking. Where the called liberated off the airplane. One time or another, while we were flying testing. Okay, so enough of those war stories. So let's go on to the slide.
All
here.
right, let's see here. Oh man, I changed it up. Did you see that? I didn't mean to do it that way, but it worked out pretty well.
Okay,
all right, next slide.
Okay, final tour. Okay, so in 1986, I got called by the wing commander, and he calls me in his office, and he says, "Robbie," he says, "we got to talk about your career development." And he says, "So I got two options for you. They both involve school." He says, "You can either go to the Air Command and Staff College," he said, "or we're going to send you down the street and make you an instructor at the test pilot school." And I thought about that. And I went, "Oh man." Well, there was a vice commander, John Manley, and he says, "Robbie, I'll tell you what." He says, "The things about Edwards is you can't come back until you leave. You can't come back until you leave. And so I thought, okay, yeah, if I go to the Air Command and Staff College a year long, then after that, then I can come back to Edwards, and that will reset my clock for another 3-year tour. So I said, okay,
Right.
go to Air Command and Staff College instead. So I go up to Air Command and Staff College, and other people had other plans for me, so I ended up going. Ultimately, went to the Defense Systems Management College, and then went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for a couple of different tours of duty. So I didn't get back to Edwards for 10 years. I left in 86, and I didn't come back till 1996. And when I came back, I was now a colonel, and I'd been selected to be the commander of the test wing. And so this part we're going to talk about is my job as the test wing commander, when I came back in 1996. And so I was no longer call myself a line lizard test pilot. I was now the commander running all the test operations there at Edwards.
All right. Well, real quick, if you don't mind, could you run us that 10 years that you were gone? You went to the school, and then from the school, you said, where did you go?
Yeah, so the Air Command Staff College is a year-long program, and you can get a master's degree from that program too. And it's limited. There's only a certain number of people that they will select to go to that school each year. But it has foreign officers, and it has Army, Navy, and Marine Corps officers. So some of my classmates at Air Command Staff College were, again, Marine Corps guys and whatnot.
Right.
It's always fun, to be able to interchange with them. And then after a year there, I got called, and they said, well, we know you want to go back flying, but you've got all of your flying time. You've got all the time. You don't need to go back flying. But they'll still continue to pay me. Okay. But I didn't care about the pay. I really like the flying part.
Right.
They said, we have a need for rated expertise in Korea, so they wanted to assign me to be an air liaison officer with the 2nd Infantry Division at Case, which was right up at the DMZ. Mm-hmm. So then I went off to another school, the Joint Firepower Control course, learned how to be a tactical control party guy. Did that for a year. And I was there just as the Koreans were getting ready to host the Olympics.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I was there from 87, 88, and they hosted the Olympics in 88, just as I left. In fact, I got a call from the personnel center asking me, oh, would you like to extend and stay there for the Olympics? And there was a one-word answer, no. Back to my family, When I was over there, my wife and my 2 kids stayed in Montgomery, Alabama, where that actual Air Force base is at. So I said, no, I want to, thanks, but no thanks. I want to get back to America and get on with things. So they said, okay, well, we think that you need career broadening experience. And so we want to send you to a system program office at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And so I said, well, if you're going to do that, I said, then I need to go to the Defense Systems Management College. And they said, okay, we can do that. So they sent me off to Defense Systems Management College at Fort Belvoir. Mm-hmm. And then when I finished up that, then I got assigned to the F-15 program office.
Oh, wow.
At Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And so now I was in charge of production and deployment for the F-15, which included their foreign military sales. So we were selling F-15s to Japan, to Israel, and to Saudi Arabia. And so I was in charge of not only the oversight of the manufacturing and deployment of the new F-15 Strike Eagle aircraft and where they were going to be on, but also the foreign military sales aircraft. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I was selected to be the executive officer to the commander of Wright-Patterson of the Aeronautical Systems Center, 3-star general, who he's in charge of all of the acquisition. I mean, every aircraft that's bought in the Air Force.
Oh, wow.
At the time, he was the commander of all of that. And then under him there were various senior officers. Some programs were run by 2-star generals, 1-star generals, colonels, and they called them system program offices, SPOs. And so when I got there, I was assigned to the F-15 SPO. And then I got asked to go up and be General Tom Ferguson's executive officer for a year. And while I was his exec, that was when Desert Shield and Desert Storm kicked off.
Okay.
And yeah, and there's some stories I can tell about that. But after I became his exec, and after Desert Shield and Desert Storm kicked off, they wanted to deploy some of the F-15s that I had just basically bought for the Air Force, right? And we were doing a site activation of the new F-15s at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. And so we knew that they were going to be deploying over the Middle East. And so I went in to see General Ferguson. I asked him, well, sir, I said, could I go back to F-15 during this time frame here, because they're going to deploy, and I would like to go over there to help them if there's any problems, that I could then work with the contractor to get things fixed quickly. And he says, no, you stay with me. So they picked somebody else to go do that. So basically when Desert Storm kicked off, I was back here in America watching it on TV, like a lot of other people.
Yeah.
So after I finished that up, then I got selected to go to Air War College. And so I spent a year at Air War College. And while I was at Air War College, the Secretary of the Air Force made an announcement that they had down selected this fly off between the YF-22 and the YF-23 for the Advanced Tactical Fire Program. And they'd gone with the F-22. And right after that, and he made that announcement there at Air War College at Montgomery and Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery. Wow, and it was only a couple of days after that, I got a call from a 2-star general up at Wright-Patterson saying, "Hey, Robbie, what you doing?" I said, "I'm obviously down here going through school." And he said, "Yeah, I know." He says, "Look," he says, "as soon as you graduate," he says, "we want you to come back to the F-22 program office." So he says, "We're going to make you one of our program directors, program managers of one of our systems, the F-22. So I was one of the first guys in my class, that had a follow-on assignment. And I kind of went, oh man, I was good news, bad news. Being able to go to the F-22, I thought was really a fantastic opportunity, to be part of a brand new advanced tactical fighter program. But again, I wasn't going back. It was in the cockpit. And so, I wanted to go back and fly, right? So I kind of went, all right, okay. So I went back. So I did the F-22 thing for about 3 years. And they first put me in charge of the training system, the pilot training, then the logistics training systems, and, anything that had to do with training, maintenance trainers, part task trainers, whatnot. I was responsible for overseeing all of that development. And then after I did that for a while, then they made me the engine program manager, where I was in charge of actually running the development of the F-119 engine, which was a separate development program for Pratt & Whitney. So we had to get that engine ready to go and get integrated in time for the first flight, and we did. And so I was doing that, and so I'd been doing that for I guess about 3 years, and I got a call from a 3-star general who called me up. He says, "Hey, Robbie," he says, how's it going?" "Fine." "Okay." What's this conversation? Right? When people ask you how you doing, you say you kind of get a little leery, but he says, "We want to make you the base commander." And I said, "Sir, I don't know anything about running a base." He says, he says, "We want your leadership." He says, and he says, "You got a good staff," and he says, "They'll help you when you need it." And so they made me the base commander at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And
now were you lieutenant colonel at the time or colonel?
Now colonel. Yeah, I've been. Colonel? Yeah. When I went to Air War College, I got promoted below the zone years below the zone to colonel. And so that kind of accelerated my career a little bit, I guess. And then so when I came back to the F-22 program, I was a full colonel running those programs and the instant program. And so then I became I was colonel when they made me base commander there. And so now I'm running one of the largest Air Force bases in the world, over 30,000 people. It is the largest single site employer in the state of Ohio.
No kidding.
So I mean, it's a big operation there. This is getting a little bit off track. Since you asked, I'll just kind of keep going. One of the things that I was able to do is I was able to host an operation called. You've heard of the Dayton Peace Accords, maybe even not. I don't know.
Say it again. What was it?
The Dayton Peace Accords.
Yeah. Okay, I've heard of that. I don't really know what it is, but I've heard of it.
So what happened was I called another 3-star general. Hey, Robbie, how's it going? Well, this guy now living on the base itself, and he's only about 2 or 3 houses down from me there at Wright Pat. And he calls me up and he says, "Hey, Robbie," he says, "There's these guys from the State Department, and they're coming. They want to come to Wright Pat, and they want to talk to you about. They're looking for a place to host this, what they called at the time the Balkan Proximity Peace Talks." And so he said they've been looking at other bases. So this is just one of many bases that they're going to be looking at. So could you talk to them? Just tell them what we could do, kind of thing. And so we talk a little bit. He hangs up the phone, and I go, "Well, I don't know what the definition of success is. I don't know whether I'm supposed to convince these guys to come or convince them not to come." Right.
Right.
One of my classmates from Air Force Academy was now the commander at a base in Virginia called Langley Air Force Base, and then he got to visit Langley. He basically convinced, "Now you don't want to come here."
Very nice.
So I met with him the following morning. It was on a Saturday in October, mid-October. And I was kind of bummed out because, it's late in the season, and the only time I can play golf is on the weekends. And so this, was eating into one of my valuable tee times. Right? As a base commander, I was able to get a tee time right there. So, as the Army likes to joke, the Air Force starts by building the officers club and then go back to Congress and ask for money. Well, we had 2 golf courses, right? I mean, it's so big. Actually, we had 2.5. We had 2 18 courses and a 9-hole course. And so, I was wanting to play golf. I was playing, okay, well, I'll go talk to these guys. So to make a long story short, I made them an offer that they couldn't refuse. And they looked at me and they said, "Well, we were supposed to go to Offutt, and then we were going to go to Presidio, and there were a couple other places and military installations." And they said, we're going to come here to Wright Pat." To which I went, "Oh no, what did I just do?" And so they went back, and at the time, the Secretary of State was Warren Christopher, and so they went back and they briefed Warren Christopher. And then he makes a public announcement that they're going to host these peace talks where you had the fighting going on in Bosnia between the Bosnians, the Serbs, and the Croatians, which is in the former country of Yugoslavia. Okay, and after Tito died, there's that former country was just exploding, going in its directions, and so there was a lot of fighting, and so the U.S. government and William Holbrook, who was the ambassador, he wanted to stop the fighting, and so he wanted to host these peace talks. And so, we put together infrastructure for them to have these peace talks, and which they just celebrated the 30th anniversary of that. NATO came over to Dayton, Ohio, this past May, and celebrated the 30th anniversary. And because what they were doing is they wanted to take the lessons learned that came out of these started as the Balkan Proximity Peace Talks, and they wanted to take the lessons learned as possible negotiations between Ukraine and Russia.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay. So, and you know, most times, and we're seeing that today, most times, even though the U.S. government wants to get people together and settle their differences and, you know, and come up with some kind of agreement, most times it doesn't work and they continue fighting, right? So I personally did not have much credence that they were going to actually get something done.
Right.
But they did, you know, I mean, to their credit, they did, which was fantastic. And so it's been a lasting peace. It hasn't always been, you know, the best of circumstances for some of the people over there. But yeah, so I hosted that whole operation, and then a couple months later, I got another phone call from a force general now. He says, "Hey, Robbie," he says, "we want to send you out to Edwards." I'm thinking, oh, finally, now I get to go back there. So he said, "We're going to send you back to Edwards. We're going to make you the test wing commander there." So, okay. So I pack my bags and I go out to Edwards and I take over control of the test wing at Edwards. My family was still back in Ohio because I have 2 daughters and they were still in school. So so I go out there by myself initially. Then after they got out of school, then I came home, helped everybody pack, and then back to Edwards we went.
Okay.
And so this next part's going to talk about the things I did, you know, when I walked in the door there. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Were you ready to get into this part?
Yeah. So this is my final tour, and this is my final assignment in the Air Force also. Okay. So we'll start. Okay. Colonel Rainer Sarnak. Do you know who that guy is?
I do not.
That is the actor Craig T. Nelson. Okay. And back when I got to Edwards, there was a TV show called Call to Glory.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's see. Edward. Okay. Maybe that movie was in 84 to 85. Yeah, because I got Edwards Test Wing Commander 84 to 85. So I think that test program. Oh yeah, it was, because it was they'd already had that program, and so by the time I got there, that TV show had been off the air for a long time. I'm glad I put the dates up there because over so many years things are kind of smushing together. So there was this TV show called Call to Glory, and the lead guy is Craig T. Nelson, and he was supposed to be the test wing commander at Edwards, and that's what the show was about, was him. And so I show up in '96, and so I'm doing the real thing. So it's kind of another little side story. In the 84 to 85 time frame, while I'm there at Edwards, in the F-16. We had that test ops squadron. They hosted a Christmas party, and they invited Craig Nelson to come out and just be an honored guest at the Christmas party. And he said, yeah. And so everybody heard about it. And so I was talking with the spouse, one of the ladies, who was one of my test pilot buddies. His wife was Johnny Johnson. I'm Robbie Robinson. So I'm talking with his wife, Lynn. And Lynn is so excited. Oh man, I get to go see, Craig T. Nelson. Well, Johnny then jumps in. He says to her, well, Lynn, he's just pretending to be us. He says, you're looking at the real deal. You're not. And she said, yeah. We're going, yeah, what's the big deal? He said, yeah, he makes so much more money than you do, Johnny. So yeah. We can't argue against that. Okay.
Yeah, that's a true statement. Yeah.
Yeah. So anybody who's ever seen that TV show Called to Glory, okay. I got the real job in 1996. Okay, so let's go on here. Next slide.
All right.
Okay, so that's the patch, the 412 Test Wing patch, and it is the primary test and development organization for the Air Force. And the key words are test, developmental, test, and evaluation. There are other organizations that do operational tests or follow-on tests, but the only organization that does aircraft initial testing of any kind of weapons, anything that's going to fly, is done at Edwards. Okay.
Now that includes all the branches of service, correct?
No, that's the Air Force only, because the Navy
Air
have
Force only.
they have their test facility at Pax River, and the Army, I think there's helicopters. I think they do theirs down at Fort Rucker. But yeah, so this is primarily for the Air Force. But that facility, again, like I said earlier, we also had NASA. So we had NASA developmental testing, research testing, as well as our own testing going on. Okay, and it was a big organization with over 5,000 people signed the wing. That includes pilots, navigators, engineers, photographers, financial management, the whole 9 yards.
Everything to make it go.
Yeah, everything to make it go. I mean, everything to support the actual test, the conduct of the test itself.
Yeah.
It included all the ranges and, hangar space and, the whole 9 yards. Responsible for the technical and safety review process. I always talk about, I got assigned to do that a couple of times. And so as the test wing commander, I was responsible for ensuring that was done properly. And as I say, there's definitely not a let's see what this baby will do kind of operation where you go out there, just kick the tires, jump in, and just, willy-nilly go off and fly. No, it is a very structured process you have to go through. And then the other thing is that while you're doing these tests, now you need to stay up with the test reports. And then after the test program is over, you write a final report that goes off to our National Leadership Congress and whatever. And so they review to make sure that all the money that they appropriate, are getting good money, return for other investment in these new weapons. Okay. So what that says is my primary job was not to fly. My primary job now was to act as the orchestra conductor while everybody else was doing all these things to make sure that the operation was going on smoothly.
Yeah.
But I still got to fly. That was the good things. It wasn't all administration. I still got to fly aircraft.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You still had to do so many hours and stuff like that in the seat flying.
Yeah. So when I got there, I checked out this time in the F-15, where previously I'd been in the F-4, T-38, and F-16. I just didn't have time to fly more than one type aircraft and stay proficient in it. So I selected the F-15, and so I checked out on that. So I was flying maybe once, twice a week at the most, just to stay proficient in it. But I had all those young captains and majors below me, and they were the ones that were doing what I had done previously 10 years earlier.
Right.
So
right.
But I still got to go out and fly fighter aircraft, and got a few test missions under my belt back then. So it was a lot of fun when I got to fly. Okay, next chart.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Let me get my clicker here. All right.
Okay.
You know what? So I'm gonna try to change this up. Hold on. It's because I'm missing out on some of these pictures, I think.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, we're back to where it was. All right.
Okay. So again, when I got there, the programs that we had or we were planning on for the fighter programs, of course, the F-15 had been around for a long time. People said, well, why are you still doing testing on that? Well, I talked about all the modifications that come down to pike. So, after you buy an airplane, a lot of times, well, the B-52, for instance, I think there's B-52s that we have in the Air Force inventory, that were built in the 50s. At least that design goes back to the 50s. Right?
No kidding.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So as we have an aircraft system, it's a lot more cost effective when there's a change, if there's a new technology that can be integrated, if you keep that same airframe and then integrate it in, and make the modifications, that's a lot more cost effective than just saying, okay, we'll throw that airplane away, let's go buy a new one. Right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
There were a lot of modifications being made over the years and still are today. Matter of fact, the latest model of the F-15 is called the F-15EX, and the Air Force is just now making that operational today. Wow. And that's it. It first flew back in 1972, for crying out loud. So we still had a lot of stuff doing on the both weapons and radar primarily. Mm-hmm. That is the heart of F-15. Is that in the nose of that aircraft is an outstanding radar, and but we've changed out those radars and made them better and better and better. And I mean, they are outstanding. They're as far as the range capability and being able to pick up targets, differentiate them from ground clutter and all that. So there's still a lot of stuff that we're doing with the F-15. The F-16, and we've been making mods to that and different blocks. So it's been, there's still a lot of testing going on with that. When I first got there in the 82 to 86 timeframe, the Air Force was buying Block 15s. Well, I think they're now up to Block 70s and Block 80s. So, I mean, there's, wow. Yeah. And of course, that's changed. That we've changed out the engines, a couple of different. We've changed out the avionics. Got lots of different times. Integrated different types of weapons onto those platforms. So that's all.
But they're still flying the F-15s and F-16s, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yes. So these aircraft that I was in charge of doing the development testing on, we still have those aircraft in the inventory today. Wow. And then on the right hand side there, the F-22, that was going to be the air superiority aircraft, air dominance fighter. Actually, it was supposed to take over for the F-15. Well, so I'm going to be politically incorrect here, but say we originally were going to buy over 400 of those airplanes. But after the Berlin Wall fell, Congress, in their infinite wisdom, so to speak, decided we have no threats to national security anymore. We don't need that airplane. And so they limited the purchase that went down to, I think, 187 aircraft. That's all we bought was 187 aircraft. And they forced the Air Force to break up the tooling so that you couldn't ultimately buy more or build more. Now, and here we are today. We're still flying the Raptor today, and it is still our air dominance aircraft. And then at the same time, the Air Force and the Navy and the Marines decided, okay, we want to start looking at a replacement for the F-16 and the F-18 and the Harrier. And so they came up with what they called the Joint Strike Fighter Program, JSF. And they were going to do a fly-off of two different designs, a Boeing design, which was the X-32, and a consortium Lockheed program, the X-35. They did their fly-off, and then the government decided to go with the X-35. They made it F-35. Well, I left in 1999. I retired just about the time those airplanes came on the ramp. So I was responsible for the infrastructure up and ready to go to accommodate the two aircraft, because I hadn't even started the fly off yet when I retired in 1999. Okay. I would have liked to have been there for that, but their program got delayed a little bit, but I had my retirement date set, and so I really didn't get to see that happen while I was on there. But I did work a lot of the infrastructure and identifying the crews and whatnot to get ready for that system when it came in. So that's the pilot programs. Okay, and the next chart. Okay, now we had the transport aircraft also, and the one to my left, that is a C-17, and it was still in development when I was the commander. And you can see it landed in Earth. Okay. Well, as the commander, I got the opportunity to go down and fly with the different test programs. And so they asked me, hey, would you like to go down and do an austere landing test with us? And I said, sure. So we got in one of these C-17, and we went and landed out on the lake bed. But what this was to do was to certify this aircraft for off-field landings. Well, to make things more interesting, they decided to wet the lake bed down. So now it was wet dirt landing. And so I got an opportunity to come in and land that airplane on the lake bed after these fire trucks had gone out and sprayed it down. So it was kind of, I don't want to say it's really muddy, like ankle up to your mud up to your ankles kind of thing, but it was definitely wet. And so I come in and I land, and okay, now I'm putting on the brakes, and the airplane, it doesn't feel like it's stopping at all. It just keeps on going. It's just
sliding.
It's just sliding along in the mud. And I looked over at my instructor pilot. Was I think he was either senior captain or a junior major, and as I'm looking, is this thing ever going to stop? And he said, just be patient, boss. Just be patient. That's okay. It slowed down, and I could see that it was slow. It could, and then it got to a certain speed, and then it finally just it stopped. But initially, when we landed, it just kind of just said, "Hey, I'm going to keep on going." And what we were doing is we were certifying it for the Army, because the Army wanted this aircraft to be able to land in various dirt capability, if it's deployed around the world. So our test guys, they were actually going off to various. They would go off to Nevada, and they were going down to Arkansas and up to Alaska, and they were going to all these different places, because as we found out, dirt isn't dirt, okay? And there's this thing called California bearing ratio, which is the compaction capability of the soil. And so they wanted to be able to certify it for this different California bearing ratios for the Army. So we had a lot of that going on, so that was kind of cool. And then the other airplane, which is the C-130J. Now, the C-130 has been around almost as long as the B-52, right? I mean, everybody, ubiquitous, right? I mean, we've sold that to countries all over the world. Well, this airplane, if you look at the picture, you can see it went from a 4-bladed prop to a 6-bladed prop, I guess for better fuel efficiency. And they also changed the avionics. So the avionics inside went from the old federated gauges. And I showed you the pictures of the F-16 and the different multifunction displays where you depend on what you push the button, you get, is it a radar screen or is it, navigation or whatever. So they were integrating that same capability into the C-130J. And so they were doing a lot of that testing as well there. So that's both of those.
Real quick question for you. You said it went a 4 prop and a 6 prop?
From 4 to 6. The C-130, the J model, has a 6-bladed prop.
No kidding. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. Okay.
Now what is the, I don't know, it's probably way technical. What's the difference? Like, is it going to make it fly better, or the engine's better, or how does that work?
Well, I'm not an expert in prop aircraft like I am in jet engines, but thrust in general is a function of what we call MDOT, or mass flow. And so if you have more propellers, you have more mass flow. And so if you have more mass flow, you have more forward thrust.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And these are turbine driven instead of piston driven. These are turbine driven. So if you keep the same turbine, I don't know, maybe even went with a different turbine. I don't know about that. If you have a turbine and then you're able to move more air, now you're getting more efficient, per aeronautical miles per pound of gas kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Or fuel, your fuel economy.
Right.
But I did not get heavily involved in that program at all. The only thing I did was they invited me to fly that airplane, and I went up to Mojave, and we were doing landings where the front was completely blacked up, and we were using infrared to land on the runway. And so I did a landing on the runway using the infrared picture. And okay, I flying it, everything was fine. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's the C-130J program. But okay, next. Okay, yeah, and so then we've also got bombers in the inventory, right? And so we were also doing the development testing on the B-2 stealth bomber, which hit the headlines here very recently.
Yeah.
And we only bought 21 of those airplanes.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, we only have bought 21 of them, and some of them, I think one or two of them are test assets. But
wow.
we were planning the initial program, and I have this on reliable authority because I know the TR general who used to be the program director for this, because when I became the commander, and then there was only had one test aircraft at the time, and I called him up and I said, "Why do we only have 21?" He says, "Robbie," he says, "originally we're going to buy 132, but Congress in their wisdom decided we only needed 21. So that's what we have today." Now, the replacement to that is the B-21, and the B-21, we're planning to buy a lot more than 21 of those aircraft. Now, whether we end up buying 100 or 132, whatever, I don't know, but we're going to be buying. We will have the B-2, plus we'll have the B-21 as well. And so it is, as you can see, is fully stealth, no tail, all that, because that all goes into the radar signature.
I would assume in like the B-2, an aircraft like that is going to have way more electronic stuff going on to keep things level and things of that nature. Much like your
It is just like the F-16. Well, see, the F-16 was the first airplane that really broke the ground as far as using electric flight controls and using computers to assist the pilot in the airplane. In fact, Edwards is named after Captain Glenn Edwards, who was flying an airplane that was a winged bomber back in like the 40s or 50s and crashed because that design, it just, it just got uncontrollable, and with no tail, with no stabilizers on the tail end there, if it pitches up too much and you don't have enough elevator control to push it over, it's just got to just do its thing, which is not good. Yeah. So I got an opportunity to fly the B-2 also, and so I go out and I'm flying. I go and we take off and we go up and we're flying around, and I'm just determining just general handling qualities, and then we go up and I get on a tanker so that I see how well does it fly on just during air refueling, which is if you've never done air refueling, when you get up and you're flying next to a flying gas station and it sends this boom out, and it tries to poke it in through your head, that you got to pay attention to what you're doing. But that airplane, it is fly by wire. I mean, it is. So I really thought the handling qualities of that airplane with that fly by wire was fantastic. And there's only two people in that cockpit, the pilot in the left seat and then another guy in the right seat. And one of them is called the mission commander. And I don't know. It's like, to me, it's pilot and co-pilot. Okay.
Yeah,
they have but that's what they are. And it's two pilots that fly in that airplane.
And they have a crew back there as well. And one of they don't.
No, that is it. That airplane only has two people in the airplane.
Holy cow.
That is it. Yeah. So those pilots that took off from Whiteman Air Force Base and did that Iran raid, okay, and they flew all the way there, all their refueling, and then flew back, okay. Now, so you could there's a cot capability behind the seat. So like I'm sitting here in the cockpit, okay, and right behind me there's a place where you could put a cot, and so I've never flown it for long missions, but I was told that that's what they will do is they'll have one guy who's not flying it, obviously, and the other guy's getting crew rest. Okay. And they've got a chemical toilet in the airplane. And so you can take box lunches and whatever else, I guess, to eat. So, when they're flying these extended missions, yeah, it's just the two of them. I mean, yeah, that's it. There are no other people on that plane, period. That is it. As opposed to the other two bombers, the B-52, like I said, that's been around since the 50s. It's got a small army of people that are in that.
Yeah.
The pilot, co-pilot, navigators, electronic warfare, offensive system, defensive system. At one time they used to have a tail gunner back of the airplane, but I think now that's done electronically today. But I think the guy that does that probably sits up front instead of laying up. So yeah, there's a big crew in the B-52, and so there's a lot of testing on that airplane again, avionics modernization, as well as the new engines. So it's had several, I think, iterations of new engines over the years put in it. And then we've integrated a lot of new types of weapon systems as well, as far as what it can carry, like cruise missiles, right? And then you've got below that, you got the B-1 Lancer, and we talked very briefly about that. It was doing its initial testing when I was at Edwards the first time, and one of the test missions, and its wings will sweep.
Really?
And it had that capsule that just like the F-111 did that came out, and they were doing a test mission, and when you're trying to change the center of gravity on the airplane, you can push fuel from one tank to the next. And so what they were doing is they were pushing fuel, and at the same time they were pushing fuel, they swept the wings back, and so the direction from where the center of lift and the center of gravity has got too far apart, and it got tail heavy, and it just it just kind of went up like this, and this fell and stalled and crashed. And so they ejected, and when they ejected, like I said, that capsule, when it came out, the parachute wasn't fully connected to the capsule itself, and so the capsule, instead of coming down like this, came down like this, and so it kind of went thunk, and it just kind of slammed the crew into the dashboard in the front of the aircraft, and ended up killing the pilot in the left seat.
Wow!
But so this airplane was originally built as a nuclear bomber, and after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and they wanted to keep the B-1 around because it could carry so much ordnance, and so they were then starting to certify it for conventional munitions, and so they were doing a lot of testing as far as safe separation. As I talked about earlier, people don't realize it, but the airflow around airplanes, and when you drop something off an airplane, gravity isn't always the biggest force on that bomb or whatever. The aerodynamic loads around that thing may push that thing back up into the fuselage or hit the tail of the airplane or whatever. And so that's why we always flew with safety and photo chase. So anytime we were dropping anything off of any of those airplanes, we always had some guy with a camera, pictures,
right,
to make sure we, had it for for accident investigations or whatever we needed, right? And also just for analysis. I mean, it was interesting. Some of the testing that I did, where I was able to fire off some Maverick missiles and AIM-9 missiles and all that, and the exhaust plume, you would think would come straight back, but when it comes off of the wing, some of that airflow, like I talked about, it kind of pushes it outboard. That plume will put, the airplane is going straight ahead. The missile looks like it's going straight ahead, but that plume kind of swerves a little bit off to the right, just due to the airflow. So it was kind of interesting to see, all the other things you can't see, but the airflow around the airplane just isn't isn't the same.
Yeah. Huh.
By any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. Okay. So enough on, I guess, on those. Okay. The next. Okay. So we had another system, the Advanced Range Instrumentation Aircraft. So we had a squadron of guys, and look at the nose of that thing. Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty
nose,
interesting.
yeah, that nose was specially modified and constructed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Okay.
Okay, and then and that was originally flying at Wright-Patterson. While I was the base commander, that organization got reassigned to Edwards. So I basically packed everything up, shipped them out to Edwards, and then I went out there and kind of took over out there.
Just followed them out there.
Just followed them out there, yeah. But that airplane is a range instrumentation. So when we were doing, for instance, the cruise missile testing that we talked about, where so all line formation off of Pac-Man, and as he's flying along, he's instrumented. He's sending signals up to this aircraft, and then that aircraft can then send signals back to another place where they can monitor the health and performance of the cruise missile itself. Well, that aircraft was used for space shuttle launches. So a lot of satellite stuff that launches and that kind of thing. That aircraft would go out and it would pick up the signals from the shuttle or from a rocket or from whatever the test asset was, and then it could record some of the stuff on board. We could also send the signals off the satellites and then have them relayed back down to the ground. So, I mean, it was a fantastic asset for us that NASA used as well as the Air Force did. And I would imagine it was probably used by the Navy and the Marine Corps as well. So I had a squadron of those guys that went out on a regular basis. And, one time I flew with them and they went out in the Pacific Ocean, and, something got launched out of Vandenberg Air Force Base off the coast of California. It went zipping into space, and they were tracking it. So that was kind of cool. Yeah.
Huh. I've never even heard of that aircraft.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's why I thought it kind of fun to put some of these other systems that most people would never know about, and so now you have a little bit better appreciation of what we really do in test and development kind of things.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So, actually, speaking of space, okay, when I got to Edwards in 1996, the NASA administrator wanted to have cheaper access to space because the space launches themselves, the space shuttle was so expensive. And that's why we don't have them today, is because they said, it was just too expensive for us to continue doing those launches and the recoveries. And there's also the safety aspect of it. I mean, we'd had a couple of shuttle accidents, right?
Right. Yeah.
And all that. So they have these various access to space programs, and one of them they came up with was this X-33 Venture Star, they call it, which was supposed to be a reusable launch vehicle. This is a UAV. This is not manned. Okay, and so we built a launch capability at Edwards, and the plan was this thing was supposed to take off vertically, go up to 50,000 feet, then pitch over, and then fly hypersonically to its destination, and then, like the shuttle, slow down, come in, and land. And one of the places that, when we were planning to do the testing, it was going to take off from Edwards, climb straight up, get above 50,000 feet, pitch over, and then zip on up to Hill Air Force Base outside of Ogden, Utah, and land there. So I am the test wing commander at Edwards. Well, there's this regulation or law or something that says whoever is the responsible for launching these things, they need to be able to. I got to get an agreement with whoever's going to receive this thing at the other end. So I got in my F-15, flew up to Hill Air Force Base, and so I'm talking to the wing commander up there. And he's an F-16. He was an F-16 wing commander flying that airplane. And so I'm telling you about, okay, now this is what we're planning to do. We're gonna we're going to send X-33 unmanned aircraft is going to fly hypersonically up to your base, and then it's going to land, and then you can take care. And he's going, what?
Yeah.
You want me to do what? So anyway, that program, it never happened, but there was a lot of planning. They were trying to build it. And so we built a lot of the infrastructure to handle the oxygen and I think it was supposed to be hydrogen and oxygen, mixed together. And
Right.
it was going to do its thing. But they just couldn't get it to work. Yeah. One day, one of the engineers on that program called me up and he said, hey, we're thinking of using some aircraft landing gear. He says, could we borrow some of yours? You have crashed airplane or whatever, we didn't have any.
Wow.
So, I don't know what they never built it. So I don't know what happened to that, but that was kind of the thinking of let's find a cheap way. Well, so NASA Dryden, okay, who was just, shared the same facility with us there at Edwards. Okay. They decided, well, let's try this. Let's get a very low cost access to space program. So they had an F-106. You can see that's the one with the tail, on the right side of the picture there.
Yeah.
And we had a C-141 cargo aircraft that, a lot of military people over the years probably flown in. If you went to Vietnam or you came back or just otherwise, you probably familiar with the 141. Well,
right.
we could open up the back, the back cargo doors, and then inside we had a pallet that was bolted down with a big reel, and that reel had a big long cable. And so then we would connect that long cable to the F-106. And so what they were thinking of doing, the plan was a concept demonstration of the C-141 would take off, and it would basically tow that fighter, okay, it up like a kite, get it airborne, and then tow it up to a really high altitude. And then just like a fighter gets towed to altitude, then you would release the cabling, and then the 106 would then let's say it was a rocket powered system, then it would, but much higher altitude, then it would continue its ascent into orbit. And then after it's in orbit, then it could, if it had a payload, then it could release its payload or whatever. And so they were looking at that concept. And so since we had the 141s, and we're right there together. So I said, okay, yeah, let's do this. So we came up with this program that was both NASA and Air Force, where, well, we called that the dope on a rope. So the guy, this in the 106 with the engines running, because he needed to have the hydraulics for the flight controls and the electrical part of it. And of course, then, something serious happened, he could just disconnect and then, then push the power up and fly away. But otherwise, he was supposed to just leave the throttle on idle and just be towed around. And then,
and
so
that picture there, if I'm not mistaken, is that not the tow rope on that?
Yes, that's okay. We actually did that. We actually did sorting of towing that F-106 around just to see, can you do it? What are the problems, et cetera, et cetera. And
that
so
is wild.
Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised at sometime in the future that doesn't make a comeback as far as the concept of having a big aircraft that can tow smaller things to higher altitudes. And then after you get to higher altitudes where the air is much thinner, now the cost to get you from there to space is much less than from the surface to outer space, whatever, right? So,
wow.
Yeah.
It's a good concept.
Yeah, it was an interesting concept. I mean, we were fiddling around with that at the time. Okay, yeah, they're not doing that one anymore. Okay, so then, in addition to what I talked about, I also had test programs that were not at Edwards, but they were still Air Force programs. And one of them was the F-117 stealth fighter, and its test operations was just about 45 minutes away from us down in Palmdale, California. And so it stayed at the contractor's facility, Lockheed facility, and so they were still doing a lot of testing on the 117 down there. but again, I had operational responsibility for that. There was the T6 Texan, which is that airplane, the T6 Texan, which is in inventory today. It was built and designed to take over for that airplane that we started my conversation with T-37 when I was doing my first rider pilot training, the T-37.
Right.
This airplane took its place in the inventory, and so tested at the contractor's facility also in Wichita, Kansas. And then the other airplane that we had was at Pax River that a lot of people know about, and that's the tilt rotor aircraft, the CV-22. And so it was doing its initial development testing during that time frame as well. So yeah, so I was not only busy with all the programs that we talked about, but these other programs as well that were in offsite locations. So that was kind of the purview. I guess my responsibility was taking care of all these different systems and making sure that we're getting the testing done and getting the test reports in, and then giving the information to the decision makers on what they want to do next. Okay, right. So this next one here. Okay, yeah. And so if I didn't have enough going on with manned programs, then this is about the time that the Air Force, and everybody started getting real interested in UAVs. Okay, now today drones are just they're all over the place. Private citizens flying around your neighborhood, right? But at the time, this was still early in its development, and so we had this thing called. Let me start down below is Dark Star, and you can see that is one strange looking airplane, and so it obviously had some stealth capabilities, but they tried to take off, and I think it was on maybe the second or third story. I forget exactly when it took off, and it lost control and splat. And so I changed the name from Dark Star to Dark Splat. And after they did the safety review board, they canceled that program.
Okay.
That shows, and the reason I talk about that is just to show you that we weren't running on UAVs at this time. We were still trying to walk, just trying to crawl, right? And so there were programs that were failing left and right on us. That I don't need to go into detail, but I used to say, man, I almost need to get aluminum umbrellas for the people who lived in Edwards because things were falling out of the sky left and right. All these different UAVs. Okay, so along comes this Global Hawk, and that thing is big, okay. That is a big airplane, and it comes into Edwards, okay? And this is taking the place of the U-2 and the SR-71 was the plan, okay.
Okay.
And it's totally unmanned, and the plan was you push a button, that thing taxis out to the end of the runway on its own, takes off, climbs up, gets 50,000 feet or whatever, and then cruises a long range, and then does this thing. And you can see it's got a big bulbous nose, and that's for all the internal sensors that it has on board for doing the testing. Okay, for doing the ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance data that it picks up, right? And then it comes around and it flies back, and there's really no human involvement in that thing, basically from takeoff through landing, and so it lands, and then it can taxi back to its own parking spot and shut down.
So there's not somebody controlling it; it's on its own.
It's on its own, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's on its own. So it comes into Edwards, and so and I talked earlier about the ramp space. And we were kind of limited on ramp space because I had all these other programs, but on the south base. The B2 program was starting to wind down about the time this guy was coming in, so we gave it some of the B2 space, and of course for security reasons that was helpful too. So this thing it takes off on its first flight. I was the supervisor of flying. I was sitting in the control tower right next to the air traffic controllers, and I'm on a telephone. and I'm talking to a 2-star general who's in the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and I'm giving him a running commentary. Okay, sir, it's at the end of the runway. Okay, the engines are running up. Okay, it's rolling down the runway. It's airborne. And he goes, it's airborne? I said, yep, yes, sir, it's airborne. He says, call me back when it lands. He says, I got to go tell the chief of staff. Hangs up and goes out, tells the 4-star. I didn't realize how important this program was. But this was obviously a very big deal. It comes in, it lands, and that's fine. So then the general decides for the second mission, he's going to come out to see it in person. Okay, fine. Yeah. He comes out, and so it taxis, it takes off, and while it's flying around doing this test mission, I go, okay, I'll just show him around. So I'm driving him around, I'm showing him this and showing him, here's where the F-22 is, here's where F-16, blah blah blah, and here's NASA. And so we're just having a good old time talking as much as a two in a colonel can, right?
Yeah.
About various things. And time goes by, and then I get in my staff car, I have a UHF radio, and they contact. They say, Colonel Robinson, yes, and they said the Global Hawk is returning, and it's got hydraulic failure. And I said, oh, really? I said, how do the brakes work? Are the brakes electric or are they hydraulic? They didn't know. The guy who called me, he didn't know. He didn't know, but somebody knew. Gerald didn't know either. He was in charge of the program. I mean, he wasn't, an engineer, and so he didn't know what the actual, how the subsystems work, how the brake systems, whatever. So I said, okay. So we go. I take him down to the approach end runway, and we see the Global Hawk is coming in, and he's got to chase their crew, and he's coming down just like the space shuttle. He's coming down and he lands. Okay, he's on the centerway. That's looking good. And he should have stopped right at the center of the runway and then made a left turn and then taxied into South Base. Mm-hmm. He just kept on rolling. He kept going right down the center of the runway. I think it's 15,000 feet. He rolls all 15,000 feet, and then the next thing, bump, and he's rolling now in the desert, and then you see this one wing lift up, the left wing lift up, and looks like does a little bit of a cartwheel and stops. And I look over at the general, his eyes about like that. So I pick up the UHF radio, and I said, "Oh, control tower said close the runway. This runway's closed." I said, "Request permission, access to the runway." He said, "You're cleared." So I got on the runway, and I just drove all the way down, and then just followed us to where the Global Hawk was, and was sitting there, it's kind of in the sagebrush with one wing down, one wing up, and and I'm kind of looking like, well, how much destruction was there? And there really wasn't any destruction. Well, the right wing tip and had some paint that had been scraped off, whatever that. Well, eventually, some other maintenance guys, they got out there. We got a hold of the aircraft and pulled the wing down, and I could hear the fuel sloshing. I said, "Oh, it's a wet wing." Okay, so fine. So, and then when they had it all leveled out, then they got the tug. And they towed it back onto the runway, and then towed it down to where it should have parked. And,
right.
So it just only had superficial damage to it, which we thought, okay, that was a great thing. So it continued its testing. Well, all right, now here's where it gets interesting. So one day I'm sitting in my office, and it's about 7 a.m, and the phone rings, and that's the command post. So I pick up the phone and said, "Sir, the Global Hawk just crashed." I said, "What?" "Global Hawk just crashed." I said, "Did we have a safety chase?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Okay." He says, "Well, look," I said, tell them to come up to my office as soon as they land. As soon as they land and get through debrief, have them come to my office." And so they did. So they came up to my office, and I had a latest technology was a VHS tape, and they had a VHS tape of the and as they were doing the safety chase, they got out their camera, they filmed the whole way as it's doing this flat spin and pancaked right in the Mojave Desert. Bang.
Wow.
And so I was asking, I said, what was your flying airspeed? Well, sir, it was flying airspeed. I said, so the only way, talk about spins, the only way you spin is you got to stall, which means you got to be too slow. And then for it to go in the spin, you got to have the adverse yaw. So they needed, how did it slow down so much, and how did they get the adverse yaw to cause this flat spin to go? Nobody knew. They did an accident investigation board, and it took months to figure out that what had happened was that airplane was the specific airplane that we're testing had all of the instrument, all of the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance gear on board, and it was supposed to go in like sometime in the future, near future, it was going to go over to Nevada and be part of what they call a red flag operation over there. Mm-hmm. And so people in Nevada were getting ready to have a control room in case they needed, because it was still in development. Okay, and so they had this control room, and so they're setting it up, and there was a button there called the terminate tone, and they said, "Oh, what's this for?" Okay, well, let's make sure it works. And so they pushed the terminate button, and the Global Hawk was airborne, and of course, it's programmed. If it gets this signal, this is what it's supposed to do: stall, put in yaw, and do a flat spin straight down. So that's what so a perfect good airplane did a flat spin with all the expensive electronics on board, pancakes into the desert, because our friends over in Nevada were checking out their control room and making sure everything worked. And unfortunately, when they hit the test button and set that signal.
The good thing is it worked. I mean,
yeah. So the good news is it does work, and so yeah. So anyway, earlier we talked about the fact that it flies autonomously, and it does. But today, once it became operational, I don't know whether there is a crew that can still monitor it and use that terminate tone. I don't know. So there may be people that when it's airborne, that it's sending signals back. I really don't know, because I was part of the development, but when it became operational, it could still have some people in the control room to be able to do a terminate if you really need to do it. But, so that's that program. And then we've got the final program, I guess, is the airborne laser, and that is a 747. I talked about, one of the first things I did as a test pilot was to go to Nevada, New Mexico. Yeah, when I go to New Mexico and tow a target, and then I'd get shot at by the basically a 707 Splasher. Okay. Well, now while I was there in the 1996 to 99 timeframe, they were planning to bring in this airplane and do development testing. And unfortunately, they just it was a chemical laser, and I don't know what the problems were, but that program never showed up. And as far as I know, it never did get to Edwards for developmental testing. They do a lot of different laser testing. I've seen that they put systems on the ground. I've seen they put them on ships, but I just haven't seen we have a flying airborne laser system. But again, part of our process was the new test systems that are planning to come in. Okay, we've got a plan on getting their testing space set up for them. So that was one of the things we were doing. Okay, next. Okay, yeah, all right. So this is, let's see, how do I start this? Okay, this is me, and that is a MiG-29 right behind me, and this is in Poland. Okay. Okay. Now, how did I get to Poland in front of a MiG-29? When the Berlin Wall came down, our Congress came up with a program called Nunn Lugar. It's named after Senator Sam Nunn from, I think, Georgia, and Richard Lugar, I think, from Missouri. And they came up with this program where they wanted to have U.S. military officers interact with former Soviet Union countries. And some of the messages that we were supposed to relay to them is that our military is under the direct control of civilian leadership. Okay. And the second thing is that if our civilian leadership decisions that we don't necessarily agree with, we don't get all upset and go form a junta and take over the country. Right.
Right.
So that was kind of, I guess, part of the overarching aspect of that. So when I got to Edwards in '96, one of the first things that I did was I flew to Russia and as part of this Nunn-Lugar program, and met with Russian officers, and because they had a test facility there outside of Moscow called Shelkovo. And so there were about 10 of us that went over there and spent about a week. And while I was there, the Russians, I mean, this was, everybody was lovey-dovey and, everything was cool and whatnot. And so I was supposed to fly the MiG-29. Another guy, he was going to fly the Su-27. And the day that I was supposed to fly, the weather was just terrible. And so I didn't get to fly the MiG-29 while I was over there. So I come back to Edwards, and not only did we go there, but we hosted the former Soviet Union officers in America. And so the following year, one of the delegations was a Polish delegation that came to Edwards. And so I met them and, and say, how you doing, and talk to them. Well, they started asking me some really interesting questions about how does the Air Force go about buying new aircraft. Okay. The reason they were asking is because they had been part of the Soviet Union, and under the Soviet Union, they were always issued their equipment. Okay. Here is your air. Here, they never had the ability to do their own development, to do some selections, to decide, okay, do I want a single engine fighter, or I want a two engine fighter, or how fast do I want it to go, whatever. They were just always issued, here's your MiG-21s, here's your MiG-23s, here's your MiG-29, whatever. Okay. So they were asking me a bunch of questions. So I took them in a briefing room and got up on a big marks lot board there and just kind of walked through and they were taking copious notes as I was, because I'd gone through the systems management college, so I knew about it. And then I'd been in the F-15 and I'd been in the F-22, and so I had a pretty good idea how the system worked, how we went about doing this. So I'm given all this information, and they go back to Poland and they talk to their chief of staff and they said, hey, we just talked to this guy back in America, Colonel Robinson. We need to have him come over, and he needs to talk to our staff. Now, why were they so interested is because the Berlin Wall had fallen, and they were now trying to get into NATO. They wanted to NATO part of NATO. They weren't part of NATO at the time, but they wanted to fight in NATO, and so they wanted to get integrated into the Western systems as much as possible. And so they were having a lot of people come and talk to them about, hey, you ought to buy F-16s, or you ought to buy F-15s, or you ought to buy F-15s, or all these different types of systems. And they didn't have a clue about doing that. Go through a source selection, and make a logical decision for what is their best needs. So they talk to their chief of staff. Their chief of staff sends a message to my boss, and so my boss calls me and says, "Hey, Robbie," he says, "I don't know what you told these guys, but they want you to go over there and now give them a briefing." And so I said, "Okay, fine." So and they said, "Yeah," and they want you to take Jimmy Doolittle with you and a couple other guys. So go over with about 4 guys. Well, Jimmy Doolittle III was one of my friends. And we'd been test pilots, for my first tour out there. He was now the vice center commander, and so I said, "Okay, Jimmy." So Jimmy and me and my executive officer, and we had a Polish officer. Well, he was an American, but had a Polish name. And so I said, "Okay, we'll take a Polish guy with us too. And so the four of us went over there, and we spent about a week giving them briefings. We were talking with their research and development people and their educational institutions and whatnot, just about how everything worked. And I gave them a briefing on the F-16. And at the time they said, "Oh, well, that's a single engine. We're not really interested in a single engine fighter aircraft." And so I told them, I said, "You just need to understand that American jet engines are so much better than Russian engines." Okay, their service life and reliability and all that. And so while I'm giving these briefings, this guy comes in to one of the briefings and he says, "Hey, Colonel Robinson." I said, "Yeah." He says, "I understand that you were supposed to fly the MiG-29 in Russia last year, but you didn't get to do that." And I said, "Yeah, you're right." So I was kind of curious how you do that. He says, "Would you like to fly ours?" I said, "Seriously?" I said, "I didn't even bring a flight suit with me." I said, "Well, I don't even fly suits." He said, "We got them." He said, "We'll take care of that." He said, "We'll give you a helmet, boots, the whole 9 yards." So I went with him, and he decked me out in a flight suit. So yeah, that patch there is not my patch. They decked me out, and so we walked out of this building, and here's MiG-29 parked right in front of it, and that guy on the picture to the left, he's the instructor pilot. Sat in the back, I got in the front. We started the thing up, taxied out, took off, and did all kinds of maneuvers up over the top of the base. Came in and landed. And, they said,
"Wow."
"Hey, congratulations." He said, "You're the first American who's ever flown a Polish MiG-29." So I thought, well, that's cool.
Yeah, it is. That's really cool.
Yeah. And so as I put in there, I said, "It was an interesting airplane, but I preferred the F-16. And then I said, in F-22, in 2002, they did too. So they ultimately did decide to buy the F-16. So they've got F-16. Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know whether it was me or there's me plus other people that ultimately came. I'm sure they did a lot more due diligence to take a look at the various systems that we had.
Right.
But so that program, going to Moscow, or then back in America, we hosted the Russian delegation, and we let fly some of our airplanes as well. We had a Romanian delegation, hosted them. We had a Japanese delegation, but that wasn't related to the Nunn-Luger program. So I had a lot of different foreign countries would come in just to look to see how we did things, because we I think we're the world's best, and so everybody wanted to see, okay, let's see how's it done, so they could kind of replicate themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a really cool program for sure.
Yeah. It was an interesting program, and the fact that when we went over there, the Russians that we met with, generally speaking, they didn't speak English, at least to us. We could tell whether they did or did not. Now the Poles, they all spoke very good English. At least people that I dealt with, they spoke very good English, and so they were a lot of fun to deal with. I really enjoyed my time, and they were outstanding hosts. I mean, the fact they let me fly their airplane. I mean,
yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. So what's the next chart? All right. So here I am. This is me, and that is my wife pouring champagne over my head on my Finney flight, which was on July 1st of 1999. And that airplane is the F-15, just showing you how much bigger it is than the F-16. Okay. And so there's a tradition that when you fly your final flight, you get hosed down. I mean, sometimes they'll bring out fire trucks and squirt you down, or So I've been, when my last flight in the F-111, I got hosed down there, and last flight in the F-16, my last flight in the C-21, and last flight in this airplane, F-15, and that's kind of the tradition. Is this, all right?
Wow.
Give you a special bath or a dunking or whatever. Okay, so that was my final flight, and then I think my retirement ceremony was the next day.
Oh, no kidding! Wow.
I think it was the next day, that we had the actual retirement ceremony where then I passed the flag to the guy who took over for me, Perry Lanning. Okay, let's see. I think there might be questions I hear most often. Okay, so people say, "Oh yeah, if a test pilot." And I'll take the question right out of your. I'm sure that people are going to ask, and that is, what is the best airplane you ever flew? Right? So, oh yeah, so over 24 different types of airplane. What's the best airplane you ever flew? And so my answer is, as a test pilot, you have to ask, what do you want that airplane to do? Okay.
Yeah, that's
okay. Good. So it's highlighted in green. Best is really, to me, best is mission oriented, not what is the most fun to fly. Okay. From an operational perspective, what is the best airplane? Okay. Now I don't want B-52s to try to go out and do air-to-air combat. Okay. You're not going to get a dogfight with a B-52 when it takes a couple of states to turn, right?
Yeah.
But likewise, you're not planning to haul a tank strapped on the belly of an F-16 either, right?
Right.
And so it goes back to, what is it that you want to do? What is it you need to do? And so from a requirements analysis perspective, and it goes back to the answer back to the polls, and that is, what do you want to do? And then based on what you want to do, you come up with your requirements, and then look for the systems that you can check off to say, yeah, this will do this best. This will do this. What's the trade space that I have as far as some things that I might not need to do, but some things are sacrosanct, and I've got to do this. Okay. So if you tell me what mission it is that you want me to do, then I will tell you what I consider to be the best airplane to do that.
Right.
Okay. So then after I give them that answer, then it goes, okay, well, which airplane was the most fun?
Yeah.
Well, what was the most fun? And my answer to that is the F-16, because again, with that bubble canopy and the fly-by-wire system, the flight control computers, and you could just look in any direction, and you just, it's almost fly by thought or magic carpet ride, and it was just a tremendous airplane to fly. So my hat's off to the engineers and aero designers who came up with that airplane all those years ago, because it became just a fabulous system. And the fact that we sold that airplane around the world, and so many other foreign nations are flying that airplane today, I think all those countries would, and anybody who's flown that airplane, I mean, they go, yeah, this is fun. It is just really a lot of fun to fly the airplane. So that's actually how I'd answer that.
Okay.
All right. Now, okay. Yeah, why did I put this cartoon in here? Okay. English classes are important. Okay. What we have here is a failure to communicate. All right. And so in the cartoon, you got this guy who could have been me as a colonel. Okay. And he says, that's what I had in mind when I told you to take a photograph of a fighter pilot going into a dive. And it's a fighter pilot going into a dive. So these slides, a lot of these slides were actually developed originally for that briefing that I gave to my old high school classmate who went off to Harvard and Oxford. And then he asked me, hey, Robbie, could you talk to us about your time as being a test pilot? And so during one of my conversations with him, and here he'd gone to Harvard and I'd gone to Air Force Academy, and so I was just kind of comparing notes with him. And yeah, hey, we're a couple of kids who grew up in Idaho, and the back hills of Idaho, small town, et cetera, et cetera. I said, how did your education in Pocatello help you with when you went off to Harvard and Oxford? What helped me when I was when I went to the Air Force Academy? And then what are the things that I use the most throughout my Air Force career. And I told him, I said, it wasn't physics, it wasn't math, it wasn't science. I said, the thing that helped me the most was English. I said, because if you can't communicate properly, right, like that's going into a dive, I said, so, as a test pilot, I talked about how you have to write test reports. And so if you can't articulate on paper properly, what you have done, all the data you can collect, and how you properly analyze it, you're doing the government and yourself a disservice. And so we both joked about how when we were in junior high school, there was a teacher at Franklin Junior High School when we were growing up. Her name was Miss Zebarth. And so as we were getting ready to go into, I forget whether it was 8th grade or 9th grade, everybody got on their knees and prayed, please don't assign me to Miss Zebarth. Nobody wanted it. Her reputation preceded herself as being a real serious taskmaster. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, I was just like everybody else, got out, please don't assign me to Miss Zebarth. Oh, I'll never survive. So we both got Miss Zebarth. Okay. And so I said, do you know the stuff that we learned from Miss Zebarth that she pounded in our head? Okay.
Yeah.
Those things I use so often in my time in going through the Air Force Academy, and then later on, going through test pilot school, all the reports I had to write and test take, when I was getting my master's degree, going through Air Command and Staff College, going through Air War College, and then as the commander and reading all those reports and then trying to make sense out of what people wrote, I said, yeah, it was my English classes that have done me the most good. Not my math and physics classes or geometry, trigonometry, whatever.
Yeah.
No, it was third calculus. It was my English classes that did me the best. So we both agreed that was probably one of the most important classes that we took. So that's kind of a foot stomper to people out there, who kind of just why do you take English? Well, let me tell you, if you can't communicate,
it's true. It's very true.
Yeah. So proper communication, and even how you put your commas and semicolons and all that stuff, and don't end with prepositions and all those kinds of things. I mean that has fared me well with old Miss Zebarth. So my hat's off to her. She's probably a cloud in heaven somewhere, but I still want to thank her. At the time it was painful, but it was obviously well worth it. So anyway, I think that's the last slide. So we'll open up for questions you might have.
Well, shoot, man, it is awesome hearing your story, hearing everything that you got to do as test pilot, man. It's just, that's like a kid's dream right there, getting to fly all those different aircraft and do the different things like that. I mean, that's a dream right there. And you got to live
it. Even as a kid, I couldn't imagine me doing that. And it goes back to, again, there was a movie called, I think, Pay It Forward. I don't know that. But it was a show about a guy who does something for somebody to pay it forward. And I feel an obligation to do that myself. And I try as much as I can to help other people out, just like you're trying to do with Marine Corps veterans, in your message about suicide and all that. Because it had not been for that G.B. Perkins pulling me aside and giving me a different mental picture of what I could do, I had no idea where I'd be today. Without him sitting me down and say, hey, have you ever considered going to any of the military academies? And me go, no, honestly, I haven't, because I hadn't. Yeah. So the thought of being a pilot, the thought of being in the Air Force, and clearly the thought of being a test pilot was a totally alien concept to me. Even in my wildest imagination, I never would have imagined that growing up in Pocatello, Idaho. So getting a little push, a little nudge in that direction there, opened up doors that I just never could have imagined. And so I feel so blessed. I really do. I mean, there are times I still look at myself and say, how did I do this? How did I do this? How did I get here? I mean, I really do feel, and I really do feel thankful for everybody who helped me along the way get to where I was able to do. And I decided to stay in the Air Force. You know, I told myself right from the beginning, I'm going to stay in as long as it's up. And then after 7 years in the Air Force, and you know, being a wing commander, and that's where those responsibilities and things, that just wasn't what I was interested in doing. And that's why I said, oh, it's time for me to move on and go to my next stage of life, which you know, turned out to be pretty good too. I mean, you know, when I retired, that commander that I'd been the executive officer to, he was a high powered consultant. He'd retired, and he was a high powered consultant. So he called me up and he says, "Hey, Robbie," he says, "I just saw on Senior Officer Matters in the Air Force that you're getting ready to retire." And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He says, "Good." He says, "Look, as soon as you retire, give us a call. We want you to come to work for us." So I didn't even have to go search a job. I retired and went back to Dayton, Ohio, where he was at, and immediately went to work for a consulting firm. And then, you know, was in the defense industry for, you know, many years until I finally got to the point and said, okay, it's time just to retire. And Kathy and I decided to sell the house, you know, like the Beverly Hillbillies, you know, Granny and the Rock.
You strapped everything down and took off.
Drive down here to Tampa, Florida, and you know, to kind of set up shop here. And so I get back here to Tampa, and you know, after a while, I okay, you know, what do I really want to do, you know? And I got involved in doing genealogy work, and found out that you know that I had some ancestors who had fought in the Revolutionary War, and so I applied to the Sons of the American Revolution, and so I've been very heavily involved with Sons of the American Revolution. And so the next telecon we're going to do, or VTC or podcast, whatever, I still use old language on it. About a week from now, and I'm going to come back, and we're going to talk about this project that we're doing to honor our Continental Marines from the Revolutionary War. And so I'm up to my eyeballs in getting this project done, do fundraising, and you know, getting it so that we can help celebrate the 250th anniversary of our nation next year. So it's going to be one of those activities. So I'm looking forward to come back and talk to you again next week about that.
It'll be good. I think everybody will get a kick out of it too. So I mean, it's a good thing that you guys are doing, and I'm excited that you're going to come on and talk about it. So be good. Yeah.
Even though I'm Air Force, I mean, I'm still obviously very patriotic and like to honor our patriotic ancestors. And this to me is a historic oversight. There should have been a monument to our Continental Marines many years ago. But the fact that it isn't, okay, that doesn't mean that, okay, just never mind. Roll up your sleeves and make it happen, right?
Yeah.
Just you know, shake the stick. You know, like we in the flying community, you know, if you're in a cockpit, you got two pilots, a pilot and a co-pilot, and one guy's flying, and you want the other guy to take over. The way you do that is you say, you have the aircraft. And the other guy says, I have the aircraft, and he does what we call shake the stick, to demonstrate, I have control now. I have aircraft, and he'll shake the stick. And so this is what I would just recommend to other people. If you see something out there that needs to be done, shake the stick.
Yeah.
Responsible, just like you're doing, just like your podcast and all the things you're doing, you know, as an ambassador for the Marine Corps League, you know, you shook the stick. Okay. And that's what I would suggest that other people do as well. And that's what we ultimately did to set up this monument here in Florida for our Continental Marines. So but we'll spend more time talking about the actual program, the history behind it, and all that. You know,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Robbie, thanks for coming on and doing this. Truly appreciate it. We were able to get through everything today, it seems like. So, hey, we're doing pretty good, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of the other things I did, too much of that is just, I don't think would resonate too much with you guys. So I think we'll leave it just leave it in my Air Force career, and we'll then transition over to now maybe some stuff in the future about the Sons of the American Revolution.
That would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to hear more about that for sure.
Yeah, how you join and the kinds of things that we do as an organization. So we'll just kind of make that just a little training session on the Sons of the American Revolution as an organization, how we formed, et cetera. And, if anybody would like to join, we can certainly help them with that. And then this specific project that we're doing.
Well, we'll set that one up for sure. But hey, thanks for coming on and doing this. If there's anything else you want to say to everybody, I'll give you an opportunity. But this is your opportunity to say whatever you want to say.
Well, I hope I didn't bore your audience too much. The good news to me is that we're several hundred miles away where nobody can throw rocks or stones or potatoes at me. So
yeah.
If you like it, then that's on AJ. If you don't like it, well then I'm not going to give you my email address.
No, you did a fantastic job, and I appreciate you coming on and telling your story. It's definitely a unique story and one I've not had the pleasure of hearing. So it was exciting to hear all that stuff.
Oh, great! I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, and again, you're an outstanding host, and your questions are right on target. So you're a lot of fun to deal with. So I've had a lot of these podcasts so far.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Well, all the listeners out there, if you're struggling, need help or anything like that, don't forget the VA has some great resources. You can always dial 988, press option 1. You can always text 838-255, or you can go to veteranscrisisline.net and click on the chat icon. Any of those options will put you in contact with somebody that can help you out. But remember, one veteran life lost is one too many. I care about you. Robbie cares about you. The whole veteran community cares about you. So please reach out for help. And if you're out there, you're not struggling, reach out to the buddies you served with, ask them how they're doing. And if they need that helping hand, please give it to them. All right, Robbie, one last time. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. To all the listeners, stay motivated. Change your sock.